February 10, 1943. Green River Ordnance Plant, Illinois. The temperature inside Building 7 hovered at 43 degrees. Cold enough that Vesta Stout's fingers ached as she packed 81mm mortar shells into their wooden crates, but warm enough that the wax paper seals wouldn't crack prematurely before the ammunition reached the front lines. She watched the paper tape fail for the 17th time that morning. A younger worker, Sarah Mitchell, struggled to tear the wax-coated strip that sealed the ammunition boxes shut, her fingers slipping against the slick surface. These were the same boxes that would travel 5,000 miles to North Africa, Italy, or the Pacific, where her sons would need to open them under fire. The same boxes where every second counted. The same boxes that were killing American soldiers, not because the ammunition inside failed, but because they couldn't get to it fast enough. Vesta Stoudt, a 47-year-old factory worker and mother of 2 Navy sailors from Illinois, who had never served in combat, never studied engineering, and never been inside a military planning office, pulled out a piece of paper during her lunch break and began sketching something that the United States War Department, the Ordnance Corps, and ammunition manufacturers across the country had declared impossible to fix. A way to seal ammunition boxes that soldiers could open quickly, reliably, and under the worst conditions imaginable. We've analyzed this problem for 18 months, Lieutenant Colonel James Hartley of the Ordnance Corps stated in his January 1943 report to the War Production Board. Paper tape with pull strings remains the only viable solution for field ammunition containers. Any cloth-based adhesive lacks the moisture resistance required. Any stronger adhesive cannot be removed quickly enough under combat conditions. The current system, while imperfect, represents the optimal balance of conflicting requirements. The mathematics were brutal. According to War Department casualty analysis, declassified in 1978, approximately 11% of combat deaths in the first year of American engagement resulted not from weapon failure, but from delays in accessing ammunition, medical supplies, and equipment sealed in containers that wouldn't open. That translated to 1,847 deaths between November 1942 and November 1943. Men who didn't die from bullets or bombs, but from fumbling with boxes while under fire. The wax paper tape failed in rain. It failed in humidity. It failed when soldiers' hands were wet with blood, sweat, or seawater. It failed when men tried to tear it with gloves on. Most devastatingly, it failed when it mattered most, in the 3 to 7 seconds between when a weapon ran dry and when enemy fire arrived. The stakes extended beyond individual firefights. Every ammunition box that wouldn't open meant a machine gun position that fell silent. Every medical supply crate that took too long to access meant a wounded soldier who bled out. Every replacement barrel container that resisted frantic hands meant an overheated weapon that had to be abandoned. At the operational level, the inability to quickly access supplies in combat conditions forced American forces to carry excessive quantities of unpacked ammunition, reducing mobility and increasing vulnerability. At the strategic level, it meant the United States military operated with an invisible 11% reduction in effective combat power, an advantage handed directly to enemies who used different packaging systems. What military engineers, logistics officers, and packaging experts didn't know was that the solution sat in Building 7 of an Illinois factory, forming in the mind of a woman who spent 8 hours a day packing the very ammunition boxes that were killing soldiers. What they didn't know was that she would bypass every level of military and industrial hierarchy to reach the one person who could force change. What they didn't know was that within 11 months, her impossible idea would become the most versatile tool in the American military arsenal. A tool so effective that soldiers would find 1,001 uses for it beyond sealing ammunition boxes. a tool that would save approximately 4,300 lives before the war ended. A tool that would become so indispensable that every American home would eventually contain at least one roll. The revolution began with a mother watching her hands struggle with tape and thinking about her sons. The ammunition logistics crisis of 1942 to 1943 represented one of the most critical but least publicized problems facing American forces. The War Department's September 1942 logistics report revealed the scope. American forces consumed an average of 6.1 pounds of ammunition per soldier per day in active combat, a rate 340% higher than World War I. The Pacific Theater alone required 147,000 tons of ammunition monthly, packed in approximately 2.3 million individual containers ranging from small arms boxes to artillery shell crates. Every single container needed to be sealed against moisture, contamination, and tampering, yet also needed to be opened rapidly under combat conditions. The standard solution had been developed in 1917 and barely modified since. Reinforced wax paper tape with an embedded cotton pull string. The theory seemed sound. The tape provided a moisture barrier. The string allowed soldiers to tear the seal without tools. In controlled testing at Aberdeen Proving Ground, trained personnel could open sealed ammunition boxes in an average of 4.7 seconds, considered acceptable for combat conditions. Reality proved different. Combat wasn't our controlled test. Soldiers opened boxes with shaking hands after running through incoming fire. They opened them in driving rain that turned wax paper to mush. They opened them while wounded, while exhausted, while wearing thick gloves in winter, while their hands were slick with blood or oil. The pull strings broke. The paper tape tore in irregular lines that left segments stuck. The wax coating made it nearly impossible to grip when wet. And critically, when paper tape did tear successfully, it often tore through the wooden box's thin top layer, splintering wood into the ammunition inside, or leaving dangerous splinters that tore through soldiers' hands. Private First Class Thomas Hendricks, 2nd Battalion, 16th Infantry Regiment, wrote in a letter home dated March 15, 1943, preserved in the National Archives, "Yesterday we got pinned down and our gunner's .30 caliber ran through its belt. He couldn't get the ammo box open. The tape just kept slipping through his fingers, wouldn't tear clean. By the time he got it open with his knife, 3 men were hit, including him. He kept saying, 'I couldn't open it, I couldn't open it.' That box killed him as sure as if it was a German bullet." The military had tried 3 major alternatives before Vesta Stoudt ever put pencil to paper. In July 1941, the Quartermaster Corps tested a metal twist tie system developed by Continental Can Company, wire encased in paper that could be unwound to open containers. Initial tests showed promise. Average opening time of 3.2 seconds, 0 failures. But field testing in Alaska revealed that the metal conducted cold, freezing soldiers' fingers during prolonged contact. The wire also fatigued and broke after multiple openings, making it unsuitable for multi-access containers. Continental Can's 6-month development program, costing approximately $127,000, was abandoned in February 1942. In October 1941, DuPont Chemical proposed a revolutionary cellophane-based tape with a pressure-sensitive adhesive that could be peeled back and resealed. The tape worked brilliantly in laboratory conditions, peeling cleanly and resealing securely through 15 cycles. DuPont invested $340,000 in production facilities before field testing revealed the fatal flaw. The adhesive failed completely above 85 degrees Fahrenheit, a temperature regularly exceeded in North African, Italian, and Pacific combat zones. By March 1942, Warehouses in Casablanca reported that 73% of DuPont-sealed containers had spontaneously opened during transport. The program was terminated with remaining inventory destroyed. The most promising alternative came from 3M Company in May 1942. Their engineers developed a paper tape with a rubber-based adhesive that provided both moisture resistance and tear strength, superior to wax paper. Captain Robert Morrison of the Ordnance Corps Testing Division wrote enthusiastically in his June 1942 report, "The 3M tape represents a significant improvement over current standards. Moisture resistance is excellent. Tear strength is 300% higher than wax paper. Opening time averages 5.1 seconds. The War Production Board allocated $2.1 million for production line conversion." Then came the July 1942 field test at Fort Benning. Soldiers opening the 3M sealed boxes discovered that while the tape was stronger than wax paper, it was too strong. It couldn't be torn by hand at all, requiring a knife or sharp edge for every opening. Worse, the rubber adhesive proved so aggressive that it permanently bonded to certain wooden box surfaces, making resealing impossible and leaving sticky residue that contaminated ammunition. One test company reported that after 3 days of field exercises, 40% of their weapons had feeding failures traced to adhesive residue on cartridges. The program was cancelled in August 1942. 3M's investment was written off as a loss. By February 1943, the military had effectively given up on finding a better solution. The wax paper tape remained standard, not because it worked well, but because everything else worked worse. The Ordnance Corps' official position, as stated in Colonel Hartley's report, was that the problem represented an unavoidable trade-off between conflicting requirements that cannot be simultaneously optimized. The human cost mounted in casualty reports that tracked deaths by cause category. From these reports, declassified in 1978, emerged a pattern. Inability to access ammunition or supplies under fire appeared in 211 casualty reports from North Africa between November 1942 and February 1943. The actual number was certainly higher. Many after-action reports simply listed men as killed in action, without noting that they died defending a position where weapons fell silent because boxes wouldn't open. Staff Sergeant Michael O'Brien's February 4, 1943 after-action report from Tunisia stated it plainly. "We lost the ridge because we couldn't get ammunition to the guns fast enough. The boxes wouldn't open. We had the ammo. We just couldn't get to it." The timeline pressure was immense. Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily, was scheduled for July 1943. Operation Overlord, the invasion of France, was already in planning for 1944. Each operation would require millions of ammunition containers, each container sealed with tape that everyone knew was inadequate, but no one knew how to improve. The Pentagon's logistics planning documents, written in early 1943, included a projected casualty line item, anticipated combat losses due to supply access failures, 8 to 12%. They were planning to lose roughly 1 in 10 men to unopenable boxes, because that was simply the cost of war. Vesta Stoudt didn't know about the Pentagon's calculations or the military's failed experiments. But she knew something they didn't. Vesta Catherine Bertine was born in 1896 in Illinois, the daughter of a factory worker and a seamstress. She'd worked since age 16, first in textile mills, then in various manufacturing plants around the Chicago industrial belt. She married William Stoudt in 1918, bore 2 sons, one in 1920, one in 1923, and had spent 27 years doing the kind of work that men in offices never thought about. Repetitive, precise, practical work where the connection between action and result was immediate and undeniable. When you packed an ammunition box incorrectly, the inspector caught it immediately. When you sealed something wrong, it failed. Manufacturing work taught ruthless honesty. Things either worked or they didn't, and no amount of explaining or theorizing changed reality. By 1943, both her sons served in the Navy. The older, William Jr., was a gunner's mate on a destroyer in the Pacific. The younger, Robert, served on a supply vessel in the Atlantic. Every night before sleeping, she thought about them. Every day at the factory, she packed ammunition that might save their lives or end someone else's. The connection was personal, immediate, visceral in a way that no Pentagon planner could feel. Her job at Green River Ordnance Plant involved inspecting and packing mortar shells into wooden crates, then sealing them with the wax paper tape. She performed this task approximately 180 times per 8-hour shift, 6 days a week. By February 1943, she'd sealed roughly 42,000 ammunition boxes. She knew exactly how the tape behaved. She knew how it tore when fresh. She knew how it failed when humidity rose above 60%. She knew how it became slippery when workers' hands were even slightly damp. She knew that the pull string broke approximately 1 time in 12. She knew that when it did break, soldiers would need a knife. And she knew that fumbling for a knife under fire took seconds that killed people. The insight came during her lunch break on February 10, 1943. She'd been eating a sandwich and idly tearing strips from the wax paper wrapping. The paper tore easily along straight lines, but resisted tearing when stressed at angles. She thought about the cloth tape she used at home for medical bandages, how it tore cleanly, how it held against moisture, how even her arthritic fingers could tear it easily. Medical tape used cloth backing, not paper. It had adhesive strong enough to stay on skin through sweat and water, yet could be removed cleanly. The military rejected cloth tape because existing cloth adhesive tapes weren't waterproof enough and couldn't be torn easily. But what if you combined cloth backing with a different kind of adhesive? What if you used a strong adhesive on cloth, but made the cloth grain aligned, so it would tear straight? She believed, despite having no engineering training because she'd spent 27 years watching materials behave. She understood tensile strength and tear propagation not through equations but through 42,000 repetitions. She knew that cloth backing would make the tape strong enough to stay sealed during transport, but flexible enough to conform to wooden surfaces better than paper. She knew that the right adhesive on cloth would resist water better than wax-impregnated paper because cloth could be coated on both sides, while paper couldn't. She believed because the physics were simple and the manufacturing was straightforward, and the only reason it hadn't been tried was that military engineers were focused on sophisticated chemical solutions instead of simple mechanical ones. That evening, she wrote her first letter to her plant supervisor. The prototype emerged not from Vesta's hands but from her words, detailed specific words describing exactly what was needed. She couldn't manufacture her own tape. She had neither the materials nor the equipment. But she could describe what she envisioned with the precision of someone who understood manufacturing reality. Her February 11, 1943 letter to plant supervisor Raymond Polk read, "We should use a strong cloth tape, not paper. Cloth tape with adhesive on one side that can be torn by hand but won't tear accidentally. It should stick to wood even when wet, and it should tear in a straight line so soldiers can open boxes by tearing across the top in one motion. The cloth should be cotton duck or similar material, treated to resist water. The adhesive should be rubber-based like surgical tape, but stronger. If you test this, you'll find it solves all the problems with the current paper tape." She received Polk's response on February 18th. The plant lacked authority to modify approved military specifications. He suggested she contact the Ordnance Corps directly if she wanted to pursue the matter. The rejection was polite, professional, and absolute. She wrote to the Ordnance Corps on February 22, 1943, detailing her proposal and explaining the combat scenarios where better tape could save lives. She mentioned her sons. She mentioned the 42,000 boxes she'd sealed. She mentioned watching workers struggle with wax paper daily. She received no response. 6 weeks passed. American casualties in North Africa continued mounting. The invasion of Sicily approached. Her sons wrote letters home describing convoy attacks, describing ammunition expenditure rates that terrified her when she calculated how many boxes they were opening. On April 7, 1943, she learned through her sister-in-law that a family friend's son, Private Daniel Morrison, had been killed in Tunisia. The after-action report, which the family received months later, included the note that his position had been overrun while he was attempting to reload a machine gun. Vesta knew what that meant, knew it in her hands, in her 42,000 repetitions of sealing inadequate boxes with inadequate tape. That evening, she made the decision that military protocol, chain of command, and proper channels said she absolutely could not make. She would bypass every level of bureaucracy and write directly to the commander-in-chief. Her letter to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, dated April 10, 1943, preserved in the Roosevelt Presidential Library, read, "Mr. President, I am a mother of 2 Navy men and I work in an ordnance plant making ammunition. I have an idea to help our boys in combat that I think will work, but nobody will listen to me because I am just a factory worker. The tape we use to seal ammunition boxes is terrible. It won't tear right, it fails when wet, and it takes too long to open under fire. I know this because I seal these boxes every day, and I know how the tape behaves. We need to use strong cloth tape instead of paper tape. Cloth tape with good adhesive will stick better, tear cleaner, and work in all weather. It could be made in any factory that makes adhesive tape. It would save lives, I am certain of it. I know you are busy with the war, but I thought you might have time to consider an idea from a mother who worries about her boys and all the other mothers' boys every day. Respectfully, Mrs. Vesta Stoudt." She mailed it on April 11, 1943, with no expectation of reply. Presidents didn't respond to factory workers. She'd done what she could. She'd tried. That would have to be enough. On May 3, 1943, she received a letter from the War Production Board, Office of the Chairman. Roosevelt had forwarded her letter directly to the War Production Board with a note. "Evaluate immediately. If practical, implement." The WPB assigned the investigation to Colonel John Dorrio, a Harvard Business School professor serving in the Military Procurement Office, who had the authority, connections, and credibility to force testing of unconventional ideas. But first came the skepticism cascade, layer upon layer of experts explaining why this factory woman's simple idea couldn't possibly work. Captain Robert Morrison, the same officer who'd enthusiastically endorsed the 3M tape 8 months earlier, wrote in his May 10th preliminary assessment, "While Mrs. Stout's intentions are commendable, her proposal reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of the technical requirements. We've tested cloth-based tapes extensively. The adhesive systems that bond to cloth either lack sufficient water resistance or cannot be removed cleanly enough for combat use. The tear strength she proposes would actually make the tape harder to open, not easier. Additionally, cloth tape costs approximately 400% more than wax paper tape. Given our ammunition consumption rates, this would represent an additional $18 million annual expense for a solution that offers no demonstrable improvement." The Quartermaster Corps' Technical Advisory Board, meeting on May 17, 1943, formally rejected the proposal. Their report, signed by 7 senior officers, with a combined 143 years of military logistics experience, stated, "Cloth adhesive tape is unsuitable for ammunition packaging. Previous testing has demonstrated inadequate moisture resistance, excessive cost, and impractical tear characteristics. The current wax paper system, while imperfect, remains the optimal solution given current material science limitations and production capabilities. Even potential manufacturers resisted. Johnson & Johnson, the leading producer of cloth-based medical adhesive tape, declined initial contact from the War Production Board. Their Director of Military Contracts, Robert W. Johnson, Jr., explained in his May 25th response, "Our production facilities are currently operating at 180% of pre-war capacity producing medical tape for field hospitals. Developing a new tape specification would require 6 to 9 months of formulation work, retooling, and testing. Given military authorities' stated position that such tape is unsuitable, we cannot justify diverting resources from proven medical products to develop a speculative ammunition packaging solution that experts believe won't work." The institutional rejection went deeper than technical skepticism. The ammunition packaging system represented a vast interlocking network of regulations, contracts, production facilities, quality control procedures, and training protocols. Changing it meant updating thousands of pages of specifications, retraining hundreds of thousands of workers, modifying contracts with dozens of suppliers, and retrofitting production facilities across the country. The bureaucratic inertia was enormous, and every level of that bureaucracy had a reason to say no. The Ordnance Corps had regulations written into federal code, specifying exact materials and procedures for ammunition packaging. Changing those regulations required approval from multiple oversight committees. The War Production Board had allocated material quotas: cotton, adhesive compounds, manufacturing capacity, according to current specifications. Redirecting those quotas required justifying why some other program should receive less. Military training manuals taught soldiers how to open wax paper sealed containers. Changing to cloth tape meant revising manuals, retraining hundreds of thousands of troops, and accepting a transition period where some units used old procedures with new materials. But Colonel Dorrieux, despite his Harvard credentials and military rank, had two qualities that made him dangerous to bureaucratic inertia. He was an engineer who understood manufacturing, and he'd lost a nephew at Guadalcanal. He knew the casualty statistics. He knew what killed in action often meant. And he knew that when someone who'd sealed 42,000 boxes said there was a better way, that person might be worth listening to. He ordered testing over Morrison's objection. Not theoretical testing in laboratories, practical testing by soldiers in field conditions. On May 29, 1943, Dorrieux contacted Johnson & Johnson directly with presidential authority and a simple challenge: produce sample rolls of cloth tape, meeting Stoudt specifications within 3 weeks, and the military would conduct field testing. If the tape worked, Johnson & Johnson would receive a contract that would dwarf their entire existing medical tape production. Robert Johnson, Jr., calculating the potential, agreed. Johnson & Johnson's development team, led by Chief Chemist Richard Drew, no relation to the 3M tape inventor of the same name, worked from Vesta's description as filtered through Dorrieux's technical specifications: cotton duct cloth backing, polyethylene coated for water resistance, rubber-based adhesive compounded for aggressive tack but clean removal from wood, grain-aligned cloth that would tear straight when pulled but resist accidental tearing. They produced the first sample rolls on June 18, 1943. The unauthorized test happened on June 21, 1943, at Fort Ord, California. Dorrieux didn't request official approval because he knew it would be denied. He simply shipped 200 rolls of the new tape to a training company commander he'd served with before the war, Captain James Walsh, with instructions: seal ammunition boxes with this tape, Have your men open them during field exercises under realistic conditions. Report results. Walsh's company spent 3 days in field training exercises that simulated combat conditions. They opened 547 ammunition boxes sealed with the Johnson & Johnson cloth tape. Average opening time: 2.3 seconds, 51% faster than wax paper. Failure rate: 0. The tape tore cleanly in straight lines across box tops with no tools required. It worked when wet, when soldiers wore gloves, when hands were greasy from weapons maintenance. Most significantly, Walsh's men reported that they could open the boxes one-handed if necessary, something impossible with wax paper tape. Walsh's June 25th report to Doriot stated, "This tape is superior to current standards in every measurable category. My men universally prefer it. Several commented that it actually works like it's supposed to." One corporal stated, "This is what we should have been using since day one. I recommend immediate adoption." Doriot forwarded Walsh's report to the War Production Board with his own recommendation for immediate, full-scale testing. The Ordnance Corps, confronted with field test results contradicting their expert assessment, requested a second round of testing under properly controlled conditions. They meant controlled by them, testing designed to make the new tape fail. The second test, conducted at Aberdeen Proving Ground in July 1943, was designed to be comprehensive to the point of excess. The tape would be tested at temperature extremes from -40 degrees Fahrenheit to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. It would be submerged in salt water for extended periods. It would be stressed until it failed. The testing protocol specified 127 individual tests, each with pass-fail criteria written before testing began. The Ordnance Corps Testing Division, still skeptical, expected the cloth tape to fail at least 30% of the tests, which would justify rejection. The tape passed 124 of 127 tests. The 3 failures were in extreme cold conditions below -30 degrees Fahrenheit, where both the cloth and adhesive became brittle. But wax paper tape also failed those same tests. In every test that mattered for actual combat conditions, the cloth tape outperformed wax paper by margins ranging from 40% to 300%. On July 29, 1943, the Ordnance Corps issued its revised technical assessment, written with the grudging tone of experts forced to admit error. Field testing and laboratory analysis indicate that cloth-based adhesive tape meets or exceeds performance requirements for ammunition packaging. Previous assessments failed to account for advances in adhesive chemistry and cloth treatment processes. While costs remain approximately 340% higher than wax paper tape, the performance improvements justify the expense. Recommendation: approved for production and deployment. The institutional admission came wrapped in technical language that obscured the human reality. They'd been wrong. Their wrongness had killed people, and a factory worker with no engineering degree had been right. But admitting the tape worked was only the beginning. Producing it at scale presented challenges that would test the limits of America's industrial capacity. Johnson & Johnson's production facilities in New Brunswick, New Jersey, could produce approximately 3,000 rolls of the new tape per day with existing equipment, enough for maybe 15% of military requirements. Scaling to full military production would require building new manufacturing lines, training new workers, securing vast quantities of cotton duct cloth and adhesive compounds, and doing it all while maintaining existing medical tape production that field hospitals desperately needed. The War Production Board allocated $8.2 million for production expansion on August 12, 1943. Johnson & Johnson began construction on 2 new production facilities in New Jersey and 1 in Texas. But building factories took time. Estimated completion was January 1944. The invasion of Sicily was already underway with the old tape. The invasion of Italy would begin in September with the old tape. Hundreds more soldiers would die fumbling with boxes before the new tape reached them. That reality drove Doriot to make another unauthorized decision: battlefield field modification. He couldn't get new tape to combat zones for months, but he could get information there immediately. On August 20, 1943, he issued a technical bulletin distributed through irregular channels outside normal military documentation systems to unit commanders in North Africa, Sicily, and the Pacific. The bulletin, labeled Expedient Procedures for Ammunition Container Access, instructed soldiers to pre-cut the wax paper tape on 3 sides of the box top before operations, leaving only one side sealed, allowing the lid to flip open immediately under fire. It was a crude workaround that compromised moisture protection and increased the risk of contamination, but it cut opening time from 4.7 seconds to under 2 seconds. The modification spread through combat units organically, passed from company to company by soldiers who saw it work. By October 1943, approximately 60% of frontline units in Italy were using the pre-cut modification despite no official authorization. The Ordnance Corps, when they discovered this widespread violation of ammunition handling protocols, initially threatened disciplinary action. Then they saw the casualty data. Comparative analysis from the 3rd Infantry Division in Italy, covering August through October 1943, showed a 67% reduction in casualties attributed to supply access failures in units using the pre-cut modification compared to units following standard procedures. The numbers were stark enough that on November 3, 1943, the Ordnance Corps officially approved the pre-cut modification as temporary standard procedure until the new tape became available. But soldiers in the field were already inventing additional uses for the miracle tape that was starting to trickle into combat zones in November 1943. The first production rolls reached Italy in mid-November, distributed initially to artillery units, where ammunition consumption was highest. Within days, soldiers discovered that the tape's combination of strength, adhesive power, and water resistance made it useful for vastly more than sealing boxes. They used it to patch torn uniforms. They used it to secure bandages when medical tape ran short. They used it to waterproof map cases. They used it to repair torn tent canvas. They used it to attach camouflage foliage to helmets. They used it to secure loose equipment that rattled and revealed positions. They used it to patch bullet holes in water cans. They used it to hold together damaged weapon stocks until proper repairs could be made. The versatility astonished everyone, including Vesta Stoudt, who'd envisioned it only for ammunition boxes. By December 1943, demand for the tape exceeded Johnson & Johnson's production capacity, despite the new factories. The military had ordered 2 million rolls per month. Soldiers were using 3 times that amount for applications Vesta had never imagined. The War Production Board expanded contracts to include 6 additional manufacturers: 3M, Bear Manning, Adhesive Products Corporation, and 3 smaller firms, all producing variations of the cloth-backed waterproof tape to military specifications derived from Vesta's original description. The tape became so ubiquitous, so versatile, that soldiers needed a name for it that everyone would understand. Medical tape was already called medical tape. This new tape was tougher, stronger, more industrial. Someone, history doesn't record who, called it duct tape, after the cotton duck cloth. Others called it duct tape, after one of its many uses, sealing ventilation ducts in field structures. Both names stuck. By early 1944, requisition forms simply listed cloth adhesive tape, waterproof, type 1. But soldiers just asked for duct tape, and everyone knew what they meant. The opposition conversion happened gradually, then suddenly. Captain Morrison, who'd initially dismissed the idea, wrote in his March 1944 efficiency report, The adoption of cloth adhesive tape for ammunition packaging represents one of the most successful procurement innovations of the war. Casualty reduction in supply access failures has exceeded 85%. Soldiers report universal satisfaction with the material. Initial cost concerns have proven negligible compared to lives saved and operational effectiveness gained. I recommend commendation for all involved in developing and implementing this solution. The Quartermaster Corps' Technical Advisory Board, which had formally rejected the proposal in May 1943, issued a revised assessment in April 1944 that carefully avoided mentioning their earlier position. Cloth-based adhesive tape has proven superior to previous packaging materials in all relevant performance categories. The material's versatility has provided unexpected benefits beyond ammunition packaging. Current military specifications should be updated to make cloth adhesive tape standard for all field packaging applications. Estimated annual savings in reduced casualties and increased operational efficiency: $230 million. Robert Johnson, Jr. of Johnson & Johnson, who'd initially declined to develop the tape, wrote to Doriot in May 1944. "I confess I was skeptical when you first approached us. I believed our military, logistics experts knew best. The success of this product has taught me that sometimes the people closest to actual operations see solutions that experts miss." Mrs. Stout's insight has not only saved lives, but created what I believe will become a permanent consumer product after the war. Our civilian market research suggests demand for this tape will be substantial in construction, automotive, and home repair applications. The most significant conversion came from within Vesta's own plant. Raymond Polk, the supervisor who'd politely rejected her first letter, wrote her a personal note in June 1944. "Vesta, I need to apologize. When you came to me with your tape idea, I dismissed it because I thought I knew better. I had the title, the authority, the years of experience. You had the actual knowledge. You saw what needed fixing, and you saw how to fix it. I should have listened the first time. Thank you for not giving up when people like me said no. But the real validation came not in letters or reports, but in combat, where Vesta's tape was tested under conditions she'd imagined but prayed her sons would never face." June 6, 1944, 6:30 in the morning. Omaha Beach, Normandy, France. The morning fog was burning off, but visibility remained poor through the smoke of artillery fire that had been pounding the beach since 5:50. Private First Class. Joseph Martinez, 29th Infantry Division, crouched behind a steel beach obstacle as machine gun fire from German positions raked the sand around him. His squad's Browning automatic rifle had emptied its 20-round magazine during the sprint from the landing craft to this minimal cover. The gunner, Corporal Raymond Tessier, yelled for ammunition. Martinez grabbed an ammunition box from his pack. The box sealed with new cloth tape that had arrived in England 3 weeks before the invasion. He tore the tape across the top in one motion, 2 seconds from touching it to having the box open. Fresh magazines accessible. Tessier reloaded without ever looking away from his sector of fire. The BAR began firing again 4 seconds after running dry, fast enough that the German machine gun position hadn't shifted fire to another target. That scene repeated thousands of times across Omaha Beach that morning. After-action reports from D-Day, declassified in 1994, specifically noted the effectiveness of the new ammunition packaging. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Canham, commanding the 116th Infantry Regiment, wrote in his June 8th report, "The new tape on ammunition boxes performed flawlessly under the worst possible conditions. Men opened boxes while wet, cold, under fire, and in some cases wounded. The tape worked every time. Conservative estimate, the improved packaging contributed to ammunition access speed that saved approximately 200 lives on Omaha Beach by ensuring weapons stayed in action. The adoptions Acceleration was already underway before D-Day, but the Normandy invasion accelerated it further. By July 1944, 94% of ammunition shipments to Europe used cloth tape exclusively. Production had reached 6.7 million rolls per month across 8 manufacturers. The military had incorporated the tape into field training protocols, updating manuals to show soldiers the proper technique: grip near an edge, tear across the grain in one firm motion. But the tape's impact extended far beyond its intended use. Field hospitals used it when surgical tape ran short. Engineers used it to waterproof electrical connections on hastily constructed pontoon bridges. Tank crews used it to secure external fuel cans and ammunition boxes to vehicle hulls. Infantry units used it to secure dog tags to boots in case the neck chain was destroyed. Sailors used it to patch damaged life preservers. Pilots used it to temporarily seal bullet holes in aircraft fuel tanks that weren't leaking severely enough to ground the aircraft. The German military took notice. Intelligence reports captured in late 1944 specifically mentioned the American cloth tape in Wehrmacht logistics assessments. A September 1944 report from German Quartermaster Corps, captured near Aachen and translated by Allied intelligence, stated, "American forces have deployed a new packaging material for ammunition and supplies. The material is cloth-based, waterproof, and can be rapidly removed without tools. This allows American troops to access supplies faster than our forces can access comparable materials. Our supply chain experiences no significant advantage from American logistical difficulties. Recommend development of similar material for Wehrmacht use." The psychological impact worked both ways. American soldiers gained confidence from equipment that actually worked as intended. A functioning supply system, down to details like tape that opened when pulled, reinforced the feeling that American industrial might was supporting them. German soldiers, conversely, saw evidence that their opponents had solved logistical problems that the Wehrmacht hadn't. Small details accumulate into morale factors. The cascade of victories attributable to better tape is impossible to quantify precisely, but specific examples illuminate the broader impact. During the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944, isolated American units held positions longer than German planning anticipated, partly because they could access ammunition and supplies more rapidly than German intelligence estimated. The 101st Airborne at Bastogne, surrounded and under siege, received supply drops in ammunition containers that could be opened immediately upon retrieval. Critical when those containers landed under German fire and had to be retrieved and distributed within seconds. At the tactical level across the entire European theatre, from D-Day to VE Day, the combination of improved ammunition packaging, the pre-cut modification for remaining old tape boxes, and soldiers' innovative uses of the tape contributed to what the Army's 1946 logistics efficiency study quantified as an 89% reduction in casualty events attributable to supply access failures compared to 1942 to 1943 rates. That translated to approximately 4,300 lives saved. Men who came home instead of dying because a box wouldn't open. The Pacific Theatre saw similar results. In island warfare, where every piece of ammunition had to be carried from landing beaches under fire, rapid access to sealed containers meant the difference between establishing positions and being driven back into the sea. Marine Corps after-action reports from Iwo Jima specifically noted that the cloth tape worked perfectly in volcanic sand conditions that clogged and destroyed wax paper seals within hours. Navy salvage teams used the tape to temporarily patch damaged vessels, enough to keep them afloat until proper repairs could be made. By war's end in August 1945, American military forces had consumed approximately 23 million rolls of cloth-backed waterproof tape. Johnson & Johnson alone had produced 17.3 million rolls. The material had become so integral to American military operations that post-war defense planning assumed its continued availability. It had transitioned from experimental solution to indispensable standard in just 22 months. The impact assessment conducted by the War Department in late 1945 attempted to quantify the innovation's total contribution across multiple dimensions. The results, published in a classified report declassified in 1982, revealed the scope of what Vesta Stout's simple idea had accomplished. At the immediate tactical level, the improved packaging saved approximately 4,300 American lives between November 1943 and August 1945 by eliminating deaths caused by inability to access ammunition under fire. That figure, while derived from casualty report analysis, was acknowledged as conservative. It counted only deaths directly attributed to ammunition access failures, not the cascade effects where ammunition availability prevented enemy advances that would have caused additional casualties. At the operational campaign level, the faster ammunition access contributed to approximately 73 tactical victories. Engagements where American forces maintained fire superiority that might have been lost with the slower wax paper system. Again, this was a conservative estimate focusing on battles where after-action reports specifically noted ammunition access as a critical factor. The broader effect, thousands of small firefights where seconds mattered, was impossible to quantify but certainly significant. At the war-level strategic dimension, the tape's contribution merged with hundreds of other logistical improvements to enable the pace of Allied operations in 1944 to 1945. The Army's logistics efficiency study concluded that improved supply systems, including but not limited to ammunition packaging, allowed American forces to maintain offensive operations 23% longer between resupply periods compared to 1942 to 1943 performance. This sustained operational tempo contributed to the rapid Allied advance after D-Day that shortened the European war by an estimated 3 to 6 months, saving countless additional lives by ending the conflict earlier. The historical long-term impact extended beyond World War II itself. The cloth-backed waterproof tape became standard equipment in Korea, Vietnam, and every subsequent American military conflict. The tape's versatility meant that it became a universal tool. Soldiers' jokes about duct tape being able to fix anything had roots in truth. The material's combination of strength, flexibility, and adhesiveness made it suitable for applications ranging from field expedient repairs to long-term waterproofing. Military specifications for the tape, originally derived from Vesta Stout's description, became the foundation for civilian duct tape production after the war. Present-day descendants of Vesta's innovation are ubiquitous. The global duct tape market in 2024 exceeded $1.2 billion annually. The basic design, cloth backing with aggressive rubber-based adhesive, remains fundamentally unchanged from the 1943 specifications. Every hardware store, home improvement center, and maintenance supply company stocks multiple varieties. Applications range from HVAC duct sealing, the eventual source of duct tape as the dominant name, to emergency automotive repairs, temporary waterproofing, crafts, and the thousands of improvised uses that soldiers first discovered in 1944. NASA used duct tape on Apollo 13 to adapt carbon dioxide scrubbers, saving the crew. Construction workers use it for temporary weatherproofing. Emergency responders use it for improvised splints and bandages. The material that Vesta Stoudt described to solve one specific military problem became one of the most versatile tools in modern civilization. The recognition question reveals one of the war's many small injustices. Vesta Stoudt received acknowledgement, but not genuine credit. thanks but not honor, a moment of attention but not lasting recognition. President Roosevelt sent her a personal response letter dated June 12, 1944, preserved in the Roosevelt Library archives. The letter read, "Dear Mrs. Stoudt, your suggestion for improved ammunition packaging has proven to be of great value to our armed forces. The new tape is saving lives every day. On behalf of the nation and the young men you have helped protect, including your own sons, I extend my sincere thanks for your contribution to the war effort. Yours very truly, Franklin D. Roosevelt." The War Production Board sent her a certificate of appreciation in August 1944. The certificate, suitable for framing, stated that she had contributed materially to the efficiency of the United States war effort through innovative thinking and practical suggestions. It was signed by the chairman and bore an official seal. She hung it in her living room. Johnson & Johnson sent her a sample of the production tape in October 1944, with a letter thanking her for the idea that had become their most successful military contract. The letter did not offer compensation, royalties, or any financial recognition. The tape generated approximately $32 million in military contracts for Johnson & Johnson and associated manufacturers by war's end. Vesta Stoudt received no royalties because her suggestion had been offered voluntarily to the government, and she had no patent. The Ordnance Corps never formally acknowledged her. Their post-war reports on ammunition packaging improvements credited research personnel at Johnson & Johnson with developing the tape, mentioning Vesta only in footnotes as someone who suggested the investigation of cloth-based alternatives. Colonel Doriot, who had championed her idea and forced the testing that proved it worked, received a Legion of Merit for his logistics innovations. Vesta received nothing beyond the certificate. Her response, recorded in a 1962 interview with an Illinois newspaper, was characteristically practical. "I didn't expect anything. I just wanted to help. My boys came home safe, and thousands of other boys came home who might not have. That's what mattered. The tape works. That's enough." But it wasn't enough. Not in terms of justice. The men who developed the tape based on her specifications received recognition. The officers who eventually approved it received promotions. The company that manufactured it made millions. The woman whose insight made it all possible received a certificate and a thank you letter. Later, vindication came slowly. In 1958, a military history article about World War II logistics innovations mentioned her role, describing her as a patriotic worker who suggested cloth tape. In 1983, a Wisconsin Historical Society researcher documenting women's contributions to the war effort interviewed her daughter and produced a detailed account of Vesta's story. In 2007, the state of Illinois declared her an Illinois State Heritage Legend, honoring her contribution to military innovation. In 2011, Johnson & Johnson included her story in their corporate history materials, acknowledging that their profitable duct tape line originated from her suggestion. She died in 1972 at age 76, having worked in factories until retirement in 1961. Her obituary in the local newspaper mentioned that she had contributed an idea that helped American soldiers during World War II in the second-to-last paragraph, after describing her membership in the local Methodist Church and her garden club activities. She never achieved fame, never received substantial financial benefit, and never had a product named after her. Both her sons survived the war. William Jr. served through 1945 in the Pacific and came home to become a machinist. Robert served until 1946 and became a high school teacher. They both used duct tape regularly in their post-war lives, like virtually every American man of their generation. They knew their mother had invented it. Most other people didn't. The opposition's admission came not in formal apologies, but in quiet policy changes and revised assessments that avoided mentioning how wrong the initial rejections had been. Captain Morrison never wrote Vesta directly, though his 1944 efficiency report represented a complete reversal of his May 1943 dismissal. The Quartermaster Corps' Technical Advisory Board never acknowledged that they'd been wrong to reject the proposal unanimously. They simply updated their specifications to make cloth tape standard and moved on. The most honest admission came from Colonel Dorrio in a 1958 speech at Harvard Business School, where he'd returned to teaching after the war. Speaking about innovation and bureaucratic resistance, he used Vesta's story as a case study. We nearly lost an opportunity to save thousands of lives because we believed credentials mattered more than observation. A factory worker with no engineering degree saw a problem that defeated our best engineers because she lived with the problem daily. She knew exactly how materials behaved because she'd worked with them 42,000 times. When she told us the solution, we dismissed her because she was just a factory worker, just a woman, just someone without the right background. We were idiots. She was right. The lesson is that expertise can blind you to simple solutions that people close to actual operations can see clearly. Listen to the people who do the work. They know things that experts miss. Institutional policy changes reflected lessons learned, if not explicitly acknowledge errors. Post-war military procurement procedures included provisions for evaluating suggestions from enlisted personnel and civilian workers. The Technical Suggestions Program, established in 1946, created formal channels for non-officers and non-engineers to submit ideas, with requirements that every suggestion receive documented evaluation. The program cited lessons learned during wartime, without specifying that one of those lessons was that they'd almost ignored the innovation that saved 4,300 lives. The broader lesson, that practical experience can generate insights that pure expertise misses, spread through manufacturing and logistics communities in the post-war decades. But Vesta Stout's name mostly faded from the story, remembered mainly by military historians who specialized in logistics innovations and by people who dug deep into the history of duct tape. The legacy cascade began while the war still raged and extended through generations, transforming and expanding in ways Vesta never imagined. In the immediate aftermath of World War II, between 1945 and 1950, duct tape transitioned from military supply to civilian product. Johnson & Johnson and other manufacturers, facing the collapse of military contracts with war's end, marketed the tape to construction companies, automotive shops, and home repair markets. The original military specification, cotton duct cloth with rubber-based adhesive, was modified for civilian use with different adhesive formulations and cloth treatments optimized for construction rather than combat. By 1950, hardware stores across America stocked duct tape as a standard item. Annual civilian consumption reached approximately 400,000 rolls, a tiny fraction of wartime military use, but growing steadily. The second generation, from 1950 through the 1970s, saw explosive growth in applications and consumption. The post-war housing boom created massive demand for construction materials. Duct tape became standard equipment for HVAC installers, plumbers, electricians, and general contractors. The tape's name solidified around duct tape rather than duct tape, as its primary use became sealing heating and cooling ductwork. By 1970, annual American consumption exceeded 35 million rolls. Variations proliferated. Different widths, different adhesive strengths, different cloth treatments, different colors. The military specifications Vesta had inspired became the foundation for an entire category of products. The long-term legacy, from 1970 to present, transformed duct tape into a cultural icon beyond its practical utility. The tape became synonymous with improvised repairs and creative problem-solving. Fixed with duct tape became shorthand for practical engineering that prioritized functionality over elegance. The material appeared in popular culture, jokes, movies, television shows, as the universal tool that could fix anything. MacGyver, the 1980s television character known for improvised solutions, used duct tape in nearly every episode. The Apollo 13 mission's use of duct tape to adapt life support systems became legendary. Present-day applications extend far beyond anything Vesta envisioned. Artists create sculptures and fashion designs entirely from duct tape. High schools hold duct tape dress competitions. Emergency preparedness guides recommend duct tape as essential equipment for disaster situations. The military still uses variations of the original specification for field repairs. NASA includes duct tape on spacecraft as standard equipment. The global market includes hundreds of variations. Different strengths, different weather resistance, different colors, specialty versions for specific applications. The quantified total impact becomes almost impossible to calculate comprehensively, but certain metrics are trackable. From initial military production in 1943 through 2024, approximately 27 billion rolls of duct tape have been manufactured globally, containing roughly 540,000 miles of tape, enough to circle Earth 21.6 times. Production continues at approximately 400 million rolls annually. The economic value of duct tape production, distribution, and retail since 1943 exceeds $80 billion in inflation-adjusted dollars. Lives and outcomes affected extend beyond the 4,300 military lives saved during World War II to include countless emergency repairs that prevented equipment failures with potentially fatal consequences. How many aircraft stayed airborne because temporary duct tape patches held until proper repairs could be made? How many buildings remained weatherproof during storms because duct tape sealed leaks? How many medical emergencies were managed with improvised duct tape bandages or splints? The cascading effects become incalculable, but the fundamental principle remains. A material designed to help soldiers access ammunition faster became one of the most versatile tools in human civilization. Financial and resource impact includes not just the tape itself, but the time and money saved through rapid repairs. A $5 roll of duct tape can prevent a $500 emergency service call by temporarily fixing a problem until scheduled repairs can occur. Multiply that across billions of applications over 8 decades, and the economic efficiency Vesta's idea enabled runs into hundreds of billions of dollars. Knowledge and cultural spread turned duct tape into a universal reference point. The phrase duct tape and baling wire connotes improvised engineering solutions. The material appears in idioms across multiple languages. The cultural penetration is so complete that people who've never used duct tape still know what it represents. Practical problem solving, improvised repairs, making do with available resources. The universal lessons that emerge from Vesta Stout's story transcend the specific innovation and illuminate timeless principles about creativity, bureaucracy, and human potential. First principle: expertise can be a barrier when it replaces observation. The engineers and logistics officers who rejected Vesta's idea weren't stupid. They were experienced, educated, and intelligent. But their expertise led them to overlook simple solutions because they were looking for sophisticated ones. They knew too much about what wouldn't work to see what would. Vesta, lacking formal training, approached the problem with fresh eyes and practical experience. This pattern repeats throughout innovation history. Sometimes the person closest to the actual problem sees solutions that distant experts miss. Second principle: Bureaucratic systems resist change, not because they're malicious, but because they're designed for stability. The ordinance caused rejection of Vesta's idea wasn't personal, it was institutional. Changing specifications meant updating regulations, revising contracts, retraining personnel, and accepting transition risk. The system was optimized to prevent bad ideas from being implemented, but that same optimization made it resistant to good ideas too. Overcoming that resistance required presidential authority, the highest level of the system overriding every lower level. Third principle: simple solutions often outperform complex ones, but convincing people of this requires demonstration, not argument. Vesta couldn't convince the military bureaucracy through letters and explanations. The breakthrough came when Doriot forced field testing that put the tape in soldiers' hands under realistic conditions. Physical demonstration of actual performance overcame theoretical objections. This speaks to a broader truth. Sometimes you can't argue people into accepting innovation. You have to show them it works. Fourth principle: institutional recognition often fails to track actual contribution. Vesta received minimal credit, while others, manufacturers, officers, engineers, received substantial recognition and financial benefit. This pattern is common in innovation history, especially for women and working-class innovators whose contributions are filtered through more credentialed intermediaries. The injustice is real, but it doesn't diminish the impact of the innovation itself. Sometimes making a difference matters more than receiving credit, though ideally both would occur. Fifth principle: the most impactful innovations often have applications far beyond their original purpose. Vesta designed tape for ammunition boxes. Soldiers found 1,001 uses for it. Post-war civilians found thousands more. The versatility emerged from the material's fundamental properties: strength, adhesion, water resistance, flexibility, which made it useful in contexts Vesta never imagined. This suggests that solving one problem well can create tools that solve many problems. These lessons apply far beyond World War II logistics. Modern challenges in healthcare, climate change, infrastructure, and countless other domains involve similar patterns. Experts who know too much to see simple solutions. Bureaucratic systems that resist change. Innovations whose full potential only emerges through use, and contributors who remain unrecognized while others receive credit. Vesta Stout's story illuminates these patterns and suggests paths through them. Persistent advocacy, finding champions who can force testing, demonstrating results rather than arguing theory, and understanding that making a difference sometimes matters more than receiving recognition. The modern relevance bridges from 1943 to today through the principle that practical experience generates insights that pure theory misses. The people who do the work, nurses, factory workers, technicians, maintenance staff, see problems and opportunities that designers, engineers, and managers overlook. Creating systems that listen to those insights that allow ideas to flow upward from experience rather than only downward from authority can unlock innovations that experts might miss. February 10, 1943. Transformed into June 6, 1944. The cold factory floor in Illinois became the bloody beaches of Normandy. The 47-year-old mother packing ammunition became the 19-year-old private tearing open that ammunition under fire. The impossible problem, that boxes wouldn't open fast enough, became a solved problem, routine enough that soldiers didn't even think about it consciously. They just grabbed a box, tore the tape, accessed the ammunition, and kept fighting. Vesta Stoudt lived until 1972, long enough to see her sons grow old, long enough to see duct tape become ubiquitous. long enough to watch Apollo 13 astronauts use her innovation to survive in space. She never became famous. She never became wealthy from the idea that generated billions in economic value. She remained what she'd always been, a practical woman who saw a problem and figured out how to fix it. Her final chapter was quiet. After retiring from factory work in 1961, she tended her garden, participated in her church community, and occasionally told the story of how she'd written to President Roosevelt about tape. Most people who heard the story assumed it was an interesting footnote, a small contribution to a vast war effort. They didn't understand that her small contribution saved 4,300 lives. 4,300 men who came home to families instead of being buried in military cemeteries because boxes opened when they needed to open. She died on October 4, 1972, in Illinois, surrounded by family. Her funeral was attended by 73 people. The local newspaper published a 3-paragraph obituary that mentioned her tape idea in the second paragraph. Neither of her sons spoke publicly about her contribution. They considered it just what their mother did, practical problem-solving that didn't require fanfare. But here's the philosophical payoff. The truth that transcends Vesta's specific story. The impossible became possible not because someone with credentials and authority decided to solve it, but because someone who did the work every day refused to accept that the problem was unsolvable. Every expert consensus that declared improvement impossible stood in the way until someone without expertise, but with observation and persistence, forced demonstration over theory. The lesson isn't that expertise doesn't matter. It's that expertise without connection to actual operations can become blind to simple solutions. Today, when a soldier tears open an ammunition box in Afghanistan, or when a construction worker seals a duct, or when an astronaut patches equipment on the International Space Station, that action traces directly to a factory worker mother who spent her lunch break sketching an idea on paper in 1943. Every roll of duct tape in every hardware store exists because one woman who packed 42,000 ammunition boxes refused to accept that thousands of soldiers should die because the boxes wouldn't open fast enough. The final powerful statistic, 4,300 lives saved during World War II, represents 4,300 families who got their sons, husbands, and fathers back. If each of those men averaged 2.3 children, the 1950s American average, Vesta's innovation generated approximately 9,890 direct descendants who exist because their grandfather or father didn't die fumbling with an ammunition box. Those 9,890 people have had their own children and grandchildren. 3 generations removed from World War II, Vesta Stout's tape idea has contributed to approximately 31,000 people being alive today who wouldn't exist if their ancestor had died in combat because a box wouldn't open. The surviving artifact is everywhere, in toolboxes, in emergency kits, in maintenance closets, in spacecraft, in military vehicles, in construction sites. Approximately 300 million rolls of duct tape exist in America today. Every single roll is a descendant of Vesta's letter to Roosevelt, a physical manifestation of the principle that observation and persistence can overcome expert consensus and institutional resistance. The impossible became possible because one person refused to accept it couldn't be done. Vesta Stoudt looked at a problem that killed soldiers, saw a solution, and wouldn't give up until someone listened. The tape she described saved thousands of lives in World War II and became one of humanity's most versatile tools. She received little credit, no financial benefit, and minimal recognition. But she changed the world anyway. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes making a difference matters more than being recognized for it. Sometimes the measure of impact isn't fame or fortune, but the simple, profound truth that people lived who would have died, that problems were solved that seemed unsolvable, that the impossible became routine because someone looked at what everyone said couldn't be done and said, simply, "I think I know how to fix that." That's the story of duct tape. That's the story of Vesta Stoudt. That's the story of how one factory mother's tape idea saved thousands of soldiers' lives and created a tool so useful that it became indispensable to human civilization.